What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we got a lot of work to do on our 6 Deuce C10. If you saw in the last episode, we tore this thing apart. Now we got a million pieces scoured around the shop. Before we can get started on the chassis and get that thing on the chassis table, Khalil's got a little bit more work to do. We got all our Porterbuilt stuff laid out. We got our whole rear drop members set up over here with our C notches, our 4-link, Watts link, all our hardware back up to the front with all of our cross members and our lower upper control arms, our bag mounts. So we're gonna get to work.
We got the 62 frame on the chassis table here, and before we do any work to it, we're going to start off modifying the table a little bit, take some angle, weld it between these 2 points so we have something to build off of, raise the frame up in the air.
All right, now that we got the chassis set on the chassis table, nice and level, and it's time to start installing the front drop member from Porterbuilt. So this is the first step, are these 2 trusses. We got some factory holes that will line up, and then we may have to do some reaming out to get everything to fit. And then we have our cross member, which we'll get on next. First step for us to do is probably ream out some of these holes and get some of this hardware put in. All right, we got the cross member mounted up, we got it bolted. The next step is to mount our upper bag mount. This kit is made for air ride, it's made for like a traditional airbag. We're not using airbags, we're using our Airlift Performance air shock. So what we're gonna end up doing is making a new mount for this. We're gonna end up cutting the bag mount off of this bracket and making a whole new mount for the upper hat on our air shocks.
Here we have our lower truss support that sits inside of this frame like this, and then this was the plate that had our airbag mounting that we're still going to use, but we got to decide something later, and it bolts through here. But one hole, this hole here, is missing, so I marked it from the inside. We're going to drill these plates out so that way we could get through bolt all the way into our truss support. We got this top hat, this bracing that connects to the stock frame. Got our plate here for our air shock to connect to. That also bolted through to the inner truss mount. And then the actual truss bolted to the inner truss mount. And that went to our center support. And our center support now has our motor mounts on it. What we're gonna be doing is putting on all of our upper and lower control arms for all of our suspension. We're gonna start with our lower control arms. Okay, our next step is to prep these upper control arms for install. And if you notice here, this side is sticking up and this side is recessed down, and that's just because the bushings couldn't press in exactly evenly. But we're gonna use the press again with just a socket on one side, push directly on here, and get them even flush with the bushings on either side. So while we're waiting for our rack and pinion, we're gonna get started on the back side here. Mocked up one of the C notches. So part of putting this in the right spot is taking a measurement And the tail end of the frame, 16.5 inches. We made our mark here, and that's where the back side of our C-notch will go. So we got both our C-notches in place here. Threw a few tacks on them, a bunch of clamps, made sure that they were nice and tight to the frame, tacked in a bunch of places so that they won't move. We're gonna install this bridge assembly, and then we'll be able to make sure that the two sides line up with each other and we have it just right before we go and full weld on this. So we finished welding these C-notches to the frame. Our next step will cut out our old piece of frame that's no longer necessary.
We've mocked up the rear end because we want to figure out what width axle housing we're going to order, if we're going to keep it stocked width or if we're going to shorten it. Shortening it would allow us to go with a deeper dished wheel, or we could leave the axle and then we actually have a set of wheels already. That's kind of why we were thinking maybe just leave it this way and use a set of wheels that we already have, but really not digging the way that the fitment is going to be. If we use a stock width axle with the wheel that we already have, we'll end up having a large 2-inch gap between the wheel and our fender, which, you know, nobody likes to see that. You want to see it as wide as you can be flush up against the fender. The customer of this vehicle actually came by yesterday and he gave us the okay to supercharge the truck. So it's going to be an LS3 with the cam, and we're going to add a Whipple supercharger. The car's going to be doing 550, 600 horsepower. Running is 255, I think this is? 245. Not ideal at all. We want to put a maximum amount of tread on the tire that we can for the power that we're going to be making. So I was thinking more of a 285 or a 295 tire. 11 inch would fit. We have 11 inches of space. We have maybe 11 3/4 total width here. When you measure the wheel, the width is measured right here where the bead seats. So there's always this extra almost ½ an inch on the wheel. So you could almost say there's a whole nother inch on this wheel from what, you know, the rim size is. So if we have 11 3/4, we really only need to be at like 10 3/4 or really a 10.5. 10.5 would probably be our ideal size. We're gonna make a phone call over to Detroit Steel, see what other kind of options they have. Maybe they can make us a custom width. We're gonna get on the phone and see what's available and move forward. Dave?
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Always.
Born ready. All right, the next step is that there's this cross member right here. That gets bolted between the two sides of the frame. We drilled our holes for this rear cross member to go into. So the nuts for this are gonna go behind the frame. But as you can see that there's this nice blockage here. And so we're gonna have to use some tricks to get our nuts back there. To get them started, we're gonna have to use some magnet trickery. Next step on this is mounting these 4-link brackets. And they are gonna go right here. Supposedly these two holes here and here line up with these two holes here and here. But we can't test for that because this bracket's in the way. So we're gonna have to grind off these rivets, get rid of that, and then we'll be able to see if this bolts in. We got our new bracket on, and now it says it's supposed to line up with holes, one up here and one over here. As you can see, the one over here is over here. So it said if it doesn't line up with the holes, it should be 3 inches from the C-notch. And it looks to be just about 3 inches lining up with this hole. So we're gonna stick with that hole.
All right, David's been making some great progress on the Porterbuilt kit for our 62 chassis. While we're waiting on our Wilwood spindles and our rear end to come in from Quick Performance, we're gonna go ahead and start doing some house cleaning on the chassis. I already re-welded this front section. The factory welds are kind of hit or miss, a little boogered up. So I'm gonna come back in here and re-MIG that and clean this up. We're also going to be closing up some of all these factory holes. So David's over on the plasma cutter right now. He's cutting some 1/2-inch holes like this that we're just gonna stick in here and throw a MIG bead around it. And then we'll come back and sand it all down and make it look nice.
So after a fun day, cutting out all sorts of little plug holes for Mikey to fill in his precious frame, finally I could get to do what I wanted to do, which was mount this fuel tank right here on the back of the truck. Mikey had tacked in this plate here. We're gonna make some little square pieces to go underneath and put some gussets under for some support. And then they'll bolt right into these 2 tabs, aluminum tabs on the fuel tank, and then we'll be square and sturdy. Just drilled the holes into our brackets that are tacked up on either side, using some 1/2-inch hardware to hold that in. Plenty strong. Just a through bolt that goes through the bottom. So now we have welded these fuel tank brackets onto the frame, but they're sort of cantilevered, hanging in space. So next we're gonna create a couple little brackets, a flat square to go here, and then we're gonna use our friend the triangle to create a gusset for support when you get the weight of all the fuel inside the tank. Now we got these vertical pieces in, welded to here and to the frame. And then I just cut out one of these gussets. Fits right in here. And we're gonna weld this in, and that'll give us some nice support.
All right, what's going on over here, David? You got that gas tank put in yet?
Oh, yeah.
How's she feeling, man?
Nice and tight.
All right, so David's got all these brackets made. He's also added a little extra support down here with the gusset. Oh, he's still got to weld out, but we're gonna get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
So C-notches all welded in, looking real good. I mean, Dave, you pretty easy kit, we'd say?
Oh yeah, went in smooth. Holes don't always line up on older chassis, so we welded a bunch of portions instead of having to re-drill a whole lot of new holes. But
right.
Yeah, everything fitment was great.
So yeah, like he was saying, you know, this is a 60-year-old chassis, and back then things weren't made like they were now. Everything's kind of like cookie cutter, everything's perfect and precise. This is not that kind of chassis. So instead of through bolting everything, we went ahead and TIG welded it to the chassis, and we eliminated a lot of the bolts. We're gonna be welding up all these like we did here. You know, we went along the side of the chassis, we welded up all these stock bolt holes, so that way it's gonna be nice and clean and the end result's gonna look sweet. The whole front drop member and cross sections all in, motor mounts are in. We're still waiting on our Wilwood spindles, our ball joints, and our Wilwood brakes. So we're kind of at a standstill here. We're also waiting for that rear end from Quick Performance. We got a Ford 9-inch coming. Then we'll be able to finish up the trailing arms and the Watts link. So that's where we're at right now for this episode. Next episode, we're gonna do a whole lot more work. We're gonna be mocking up our LS3, our transmission. We're gonna be getting that rear end in. We're gonna be getting the front all buttoned up. We're also gonna start installing our Airlift Performance management set, kit, our tank, and our Builder Series shock. So that's a wrap for this episode. We hope y'all enjoy it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, in case the viewership wants to know what 60-year-old dirt looks like, Here's a pile of it.